Hello everyone, my name is Rechi and welcome to my channel. Those of you who subscribed and liked, thank you so much for doing that. And those of you who have not, please do, because we all know how important subscribing and liking are. So today I want to talk about something that's been really kind of difficult for me. I'm probably going to have to do a series on this topic, but I guess this will be like the first part. So I want to talk about why conversations and socializing can be very difficult for me and even traumatic. I think that a lot of us experience this kind of thing, and when we get a diagnosis or when we talk about autism and what autism is, one of the things that is talked about is difficulties in socializing, or social deficits as people like to call it. I think it's important that we understand more in depth what that actually means, because difficulty socializing or social deficits can be very blanket statements that don't mean a lot. They become, some of these statements or some of these things that we talk about when we describe autism, they kind of become cliches after a while, I think. And when something becomes a cliche, it kind of doesn't have any meaning, really. And so what happens is our experiences get very minimalized and very trivialized and invalidated, because people don't understand what these things mean in day-to-day life. So I kind of want to share what they mean in my life. I've come to a point where I find conversations incredibly difficult with people, to the point where I get very discouraged, very disheartened, very hopeless, and I just don't want to have conversations with people anymore, because it's just too much of an effort. And I'm going to explain to you what I mean by that. I'm going to share a couple of things that happened in some of the recent conversations that I've had. And when I share these with you, I want you to understand that if these things were happening once in a blue moon, they wouldn't be a huge deal. They wouldn't affect me as much as they're affecting me. They wouldn't make me feel what I feel when I talk to people. But the fact is that these kinds of conversations happen to me on a near daily basis. And when they do, it gets to the point where it's just not worth it anymore trying to converse with people. So I'm going to give you some examples of what I mean. I had a conversation very recently, and it was with someone that had known me about 30 years ago. And the person, when we knew each other, we didn't really know each other. We were kind of acquaintances. We had had a couple of conversations that were very superficial, kind of like just, how's the weather kind of thing. And I recently saw a picture that this person had put on Facebook, and I thought it was really funny. And so I reached out and asked the person how he was doing, and he, we kind of struck a couple conversations from there. And this is somebody that, I I knew was a very nice person, a very pleasant person, and someone that I, was really happy to get in touch with again. And so keep in mind, this person didn't know me intimately 30 years ago and hadn't spoken to me in 30 years. And so he didn't know that I was autistic. And I told him, and we were talking about autism because he's a little bit familiar. And then the conversation turned to a question that I get asked all the time. And, it's a very common question. He said to me, "What do you do for work?" And I said, "Well, I can't work anymore because I am too neurologically damaged. I'm no longer able to work." And he said to me, "I don't believe you are neurologically damaged. I don't believe you can no longer work. Because you're having this conversation with me now. You're engaged in this conversation with me. And at the time of the conversation, I actually had a little bit of energy, so I was doing some baking, and I had told him I was baking. And he said, because I was baking while having this conversation and engaged with him in the conversation, he didn't believe that I was too neurologically damaged to work." Yeah. And I had to then explain to him why. And then he said to me, "So, did your doctors tell you this?" And I said, "As a matter of fact, they did." And he said, "Well, in that case, I guess you really can't work." Now, I don't know. I just feel that that kind of judgmental attitude really overwhelms me. When someone who is a complete stranger or who barely knows me at all has the audacity to decide what I am capable of doing neurologically or in any other capacity, challenges me on it, and then says, "Oh, well, if your doctor said, then I guess I'll agree with that." I'm like, wow, okay, that's a little bit, I don't even know what the word is for that. But the way that it makes me feel is that I needed his permission to be as disabled as I am, and to be justified in the fact that I'm no longer able to work. That's what that feels like when people do that. Another conversation I had fairly recently with another person that knows me a little bit better than the previous person, but not as intimately as, I guess, like my family. I remember we were having this conversation, and for those of you who don't know, I ski. And I am a Special Olympics athlete, and one of the things that I do at Special Olympics is ski. Now, I also ski on my own. I don't need Special Olympics to ski. I'm an avid skier. I ski with Special Olympics because it's something that I enjoy. So I was on the Special Olympics ski team, and this person is also an athlete on that team. And he and I had become really good friends, and we had been friends for several years. And I was talking to him one day, and I told him, I said, I'm not going to be coming to practice with you guys, on that day, because I was having a hypertonia flare-up. I also have genetic hypertonia, and hypertonia it's a muscular, well, for me in particular, it's a muscular issue, but it is neurologically based. And so I can have very, very painful flare-ups, very serious flare-ups, and I constantly have to have physical therapy and management for that, and I have to do a lot of things physically to take care of that. And if part of my body is flaring up a certain way, my body, it becomes very, very painful. I can't, do certain movements and so on. So I told him I was in significant pain, and so I wouldn't be attending their practice because I would not be able to commit myself to doing the things that they were doing in their practice. But what I needed to do was to go and ski on my own so that I could work on the specific moves and the specific drills that were going to help me with what was going on with me at the time. So I went and I was, doing my thing, and they were there at the same time. And so he saw me. And so he then talked to me, a later day after that. And he started yelling at me and disciplining me and telling me that if I was going to ski, I had to ski with them. I didn't have the right to tell him. And he says, oh, you obviously weren't in pain because you were skiing. And I tried to explain to him that this particular disability is, how it works, and that I have to manage it. And then he said to me, oh, so you think you know everything? Let me do that again. Yeah. And this is another example of the kind of conversations I have with people, where people will challenge me on what I can and can't do. And then when I try to explain to them that I know how to manage my own body that I've been living in for over half a century, and especially with a disability that they know absolutely nothing about. In fact, some of them have never even heard of my disabilities that I have. Their response is, oh, you think you know everything. Well, no, I don't think I know everything, but I do know about my own body. I do know how my body works. I do know how my autism works. But yet people feel that it's appropriate and okay for them to reprimand me when I tell them that I know what I need to do for my own body. I had another conversation with someone at Special Olympics. And these conversations happen with everyone, not just at Special Olympics. But this was an incident where I had to leave an event because the music they were playing was too overwhelming for me, and it wasn't possible for me to distance myself enough so that it wouldn't affect me. And I knew that if I stayed, I would start to lose function, and I would, collapse or have an incident. And so I asked the assistant coach if I could leave, and he said yes. And he said, just be back in time for my event And so I left and I came back in time. And then I got yelled at and reprimanded and disciplined by another coach who told me I had no right to leave. And when I spoke to someone else about this later, and this was another person in the coaching staff, I explained to her, if it had been your child, her child is also an athlete, and he was in a similar situation, you as his parent, his legal guardian, would have had every right to take him out of that situation so that he could be okay. But I was told that as my own legal guardian, I don't have the right to take myself out so that I could be okay. And then she said to me, she says, well, we wanted you to stay so that if something had happened to you, we could get help for you. Let me do another eye roll here. Yeah. I'm like, really? Okay, what? And I was like, that is unbelievable. First of all, if something had happened to me, they would have absolutely no idea what help I would need or how to provide it, because they don't listen to anything I say. And secondly, I was like, are you serious? So rather than allowing me to take care of my situation in the safest, most efficient way possible, and the way that's going to cause the least amount of damage, you would prefer me to stay in an unsafe situation, have a severe consequence, and then expect you, who knows nothing about my condition, to try to figure out how to help me. What would have probably happened is they probably would have called an ambulance, forced me to go in it, and then I would have been stranded at a hospital because they wouldn't have come to get me. I would have had no help whatsoever because that would have only made everything 1,000 times worse. And I would have had a huge bill to pay. And so what I'm finding is that a lot of times when I have conversations with people, people will treat me as if I don't know anything at all about myself, even though they know nothing about my condition or my disabilities. And then if I try to say something that shows that I, a 55-year-old person, knows my own body, I then get reprimanded for saying that I know my own body. And so when I have these kinds of conversations all the time, almost every day, it truly becomes unbearable. And I don't know how many of you experience this. I'm assuming a lot of you do, because I know that some of my friends who are autistic, they tell me that they experience this as well. But what I would like to see is to have people show a little bit more respect, especially when talking to autistic adults. If I had cancer, or if I had anything else, if I had spina bifida, or if I had, I don't know, cerebral palsy or whatever, I'm not sure that people would treat me that way. But because I am autistic and I don't look disabled, people assume that I don't know anything about my disability. I don't know. I just feel that it's crazy. I have friends who are blind. And I have never once ever heard anyone challenge them when they talk about their issues being blind. Not once. But yet, as an autistic person, I get challenged on my understanding of myself on a near daily basis. This is completely disrespectful. And it is really debilitating when people do this. So I'm hoping that people can understand that it is not an appropriate thing to do. Please leave comments on this if you're affected by it, or if you know people who are, or even if this is something that you've done yourself and you're now realizing it and would like to change it. So thank you so much for watching this video, and as I continue with this series, I will be able to talk about more things that are difficult in socializing and conversing. But again, I'm in my car at one of my favorite parks. I'm going to show you where I am. So this is where I am right now. There were a significant amount of geese on the lake earlier, but I guess they've all flown off. Oh, there's some over there. But all right, well, thank you everyone, and we will see you next time.